Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we've got another gunsmithing video for you. In today's video, we are going to be determining the caliber of a very old school German hunting rifle. This is a very old rifle with a Damascus set of Damascus barrels, exposed hammers, and uses a very early style of under lever locking system that uses a rotating lug to lock into the recesses of the undersides of the barrel. So definitely not as strong of an action as a modern type of, firearm. We've got cape horn as our under lever and as our trigger guard here. We've got a nice fine 60% engraving on this particular gun. We got a nice pretty piece of walnut that's been repaired in a couple of places. Looks to be pretty professionally repaired. The gun looks to be pretty sound. We don't know what the caliber is. So what we're going to do is we're going to determine the caliber of this nice old hunting rifle today, and also kind of look at some things, some little hacks that I can show you guys when it comes to these old doubles. And we're going to determine if the gun is safe to shoot. We're going to inspect it, and we're going to find out what it shoots, because we don't know. I have a creeping suspicion that on this particular rifle, it's a shotgun and a rifle. So this is what they call a cape gun. And in Germany, you have a couple of different styles of old school sporting guns like this. You've got drillings, which are 3 barrels, and they'll usually have 2 smooth bores on the top and a rifle barrel on the bottom. And then you have a cape gun. And cape guns are basically, you're usually going to have a smooth bore on one side and a rifle barrel on the other. Now, one of the reasons, before we even look at this gun, that makes me think it's a German firearm, for one, is because in Germany, usually the rifle caliber was on the right side of the gun, whereby your British-made examples and a lot of your Belgian-made examples have the rifle caliber on the left side of the gun. So since this is a smooth bore on the left side, we're going to pretty much, without even looking at the gun, know that it's a German produced firearm. We look at the top and we see that the maker is C. Freyer out of Dresden, which is in Germany. So right there we know it is a, was in Germany. I think it was just destroyed during World War II. I think that town was pretty much wiped out. But it was made in Germany. All right, we do have twist steel barrels. We're going to pull the gun apart and have a look and see if we can determine exactly what this thing shoots. All right, let's do it. All right, well, the gun appears to lock up pretty tight. That's a definite plus. We are intending on shooting this cape gun, so we want to make sure that everything's nice and safe. We're going to go ahead and, first and foremost, we're just going to check the power of the hammers, make sure that everything cocks like it's supposed to. All right, so that right hammer sets really nicely. Trigger works. Left hammer. Trigger sets nice and distinct. We're not going to dry fire it, obviously. It's very old. All right, that works. Nice. So we got good tension on our hammers. We're going to go ahead and pull the gun apart. Now, the gun was advertised as being a known 16 bore on the left and an unknown rifle caliber on the right. So I think the big point here is that we're trying to determine what the rifle caliber is, and we're going to utilize some Brownells Cerrosafe to accomplish that task. I've got a brass 16 gauge hole. We're going to go ahead and just slip it into the left chamber, and indeed it does look like we are dealing with a 16 gauge bore on the left. So smooth bore 16 gauge, we pretty much knew that. Now, an old gun like this, being Damascus, you want to stick to straight black powder. You do not want to shoot smokeless out of a Damascus barrel. Basically a twist steel barrel, and it's hard to tell because this gun is so old and so patinaed. A Damascus barrel has basically layers of iron that were driven and welded, like basically lap welded around a mandrel. So what they call a twist steel barrel, Damascus barrel, twist steel, whatever you want to call it, they tend to not be as strong as some of the more modern steels that barrels are made out of. So this is pretty much a black powder game only. So in terms of that 16 gauge there, yeah, you could load up any number of different amounts of 16 gauge using black powder. Now obviously we would need to determine the choke, which we're going to measure in a minute just to kind of see what kind of constriction we have on the smooth bore. and then we'll take some measurements here. So why don't we start by doing that? Let's have a look at the smooth bore on the end, and we're just going to get a real rough estimate here of the measurement and just see what we're talking. All right, so we got 656. So we're going to take some notes here, guys. All right, so 656, and that's your 16 gauge at the muzzle. We'll bounce around some numbers later, and we'll figure out what kind of constriction that equates to. And that'll tell us what we can safely shoot out of the smoothbore barrel with appropriately sized and formed black powder loads. Now, the rifled barrel is a little bit of an enigma here, guys, because it's definitely an intermediate length. I'm going to go ahead and pull the action apart. There's a lever up front right here. We're going to shift it to the side, and check this out. The barrel just drops off. This whole assembly stays together. So while we got the assembly apart, before we get on to this, we're going to have a look here. And just because of my knowledge of German proof marks, there is a German proof mark right here on the receiver. So that's going to tell us that this is definitely a German-produced under-lever sporting firearm. And you can see the locking system pretty clearly there next to the next to our proof mark. So that is a German proof mark. There is a pretty well-established series of proof marks that you can look up online, and that is definitely a German proof mark. It might help us date the gun a little bit, but I would imagine this gun was probably produced around the turn of the century. So she's old, guys. Got to treat her with respect. All right, so we're going to look at this, and the rifling's in pretty good shape. Both the bores are in pretty good shape. We're also going to, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold this barrel up by the hook right here so it can ring loud, and we're going to sound the barrel. So that's another thing that you can do as well. Just hold it by your finger. We're going to grab a mallet, and we're going to give it just a little bit of a... All right, so see, that rattling is coming from this sling stud. So that's not the barrel. We could remove that or tape it if we want, but you notice, you know, it's got a ring to it. Now, if you take one of these doubles like this and you sound it, and it sounds like a thud or a clack, like it'll sound kind of like this. Or, let me see if I can make it do it. If I was to take, I don't know, and stuff some wadding or something into the barrel and then hit it, it would have kind of a thud or a clack. So you don't want like a clang or a thud, you want a ring. All right, so see, that's got a bit of a ring, and that buzzing obviously is just from this sling stud here. The ring is what you want. That means that our barrels have not become separated or delaminated from each other, which can be a serious problem. Not only will that make the gun unsafe to fire, but especially in a twist steel barrel, you don't know if moisture has found its way in between the vent rib and in between all of this and caused some type of corrosion to occur under it, and you might have some form of pitting or delamination occurring in the Damascus barrels that will make this gun fail, and you don't want that. So we've got a nice ring going on. We got a good sound to it. So in terms of sounding the barrels, that can give you an idea on these old doubles as to what's going on. Now, when I picked up this this gun, it was advertised as a 577 Snyder. I knew when I bought it that that was incorrect, but I have a 577 Snyder case right here. All right, we're going to take and slide it in the rifle, and you can see it doesn't even begin to drop in. Not even close. And it rattles around. So this is definitely bigger. This is definitely bigger than 577 Snyder. Okay? So, you know, this rifle caliber is not a 577. And also, if I take a 577 Snyder projectile, watch this. I'm going to drop it through the end of the gun. Look at that, dropped right through. It did not even begin to contact the rifling. So, whatever rifle caliber that we're dealing with here, as monstrous as a 577 Snyder is, it's not a 577 Snyder. So, it's bigger than that. All right, so that we know. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some Cerrosafe, and we're going to take some measurements of the muzzle, and we're also going to chamber cast this thing. I'm going to show you guys how to do that, and we're going to try to get to the bottom of this. Even without chamber casting though, what you can do is you can take the feeler gauge, a depth feeler on your caliper, and you can just push it down until it contacts the edge of the chamber here on the inside, and we can get a bit of an idea about our length. So let's just do that right now. Roughly about 1.3 inches. So that's a very intermediate chamber. It's a very short chamber, and just with the naked eye looking down in this barrel, I can see it's a very, very short chamber. So we're gonna go ahead and chamber cast, and that'll tell the tale. So let's do it. All right, so according to the measurement that we took on our 16 gauge barrel, cylinder bore on the 16 gauge is .662. So we're actually slightly under what cylinder bore would be anyway. It's probably close to about a skeet choke. So definitely not a super tight choke on that Damascus barrel, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. Probably be okay to shoot buckshot or something like that out of it, but we're going to definitely load it with something light if we're going to shoot the 16 bore. All right, so getting on to the rifle bore, what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of patches here. We're going to slug first. We're going to Cerrosafe the muzzle end, and we're just going to kind of plug it here with a patch. Like that'll do. And you don't have to do two, but I'm gonna put two patches in there just to make sure. All right. And we're gonna grab our patches, and we'll do about the first inch of the rifling, okay? Now guys, here's the caveat I'm gonna provide here. Be very, very careful doing this, because if you're dealing with any type of double that has a soldered together barrel joint like this, you do not want to heat that solder up to the point where it's going to melt. It is not good. Okay, trust me, you don't want to do it, especially on an old gun like this. Guys, there's very few people out there that still work on these old guns like this. So if for any reason you think that you can't do this, don't. Take it to somebody that knows what they're doing. I don't have a ridiculous amount of force clamping this thing, just a little bit, just enough to hold it. That's all we're doing, is using the vise to hold it. So I'm going to take a chunk of Cerrosafe here, and I'm going to heat it up indirectly. Now, the thing is, guys, I am going to have to put a little bit of heat on this barrel because it's like a mold. This stuff melts at like 200 degrees, which 200 degrees is probably not enough to melt the solder between these two barrels, but we don't want to risk that. Okay, so we are going to have to put just a slight amount of heat so it'll form well. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm doing this at kind of a weird angle, guys, because I'm trying to demonstrate for y'all. All right, that's plenty of heat right there. All right, just a tiny amount of heat. About that much. All right, we're just going to pour it in there. Look at that. The Cerrosafe Wizard, baby. That's what we're talking. All right, we're going to set that off to the side, somewhere safe where, you know, and it'll cure up pretty quick. And what we want to do, you know what, I do not need to put any more heat on that barrel. It's just fine. Just the heat of the Cerrosafe is plenty. It's just slightly discomforting to touch on the outside. That's going to cast just fine. We're going to let that cure up, and what will happen is it will shrink just a little bit once it sets up. See, it's almost ready to touch right now. It doesn't take long for this alloy to come back down to temperature. We're going to gently drive it out, and we'll measure our slug, and that's going to give us an idea of our bore diameter, which will help us determine what this cartridge is. Now, we're also going to do a chamber cast, but the reason we want to cast from the chamber end and the muzzle end is because we want to know if there's any type of constriction Sometimes these old guns will have what they call gain twist rifling. And if it's gain twist, it means that the twist will get tighter as the bullet travels down the barrel, okay? So it's important to know if the diameter of the barrel is changing from chamber end to muzzle end, and that's what we want to determine. And we also just going to give us an idea of our nominal bore diameter. So we're going to let this cure up, we'll drive it out, let's take some measurements. All right guys, nothing nothing crazy about this. We're going to drive our Cerrosafe Slug out of the end of the barrel. Gently, we're supporting the 16 gauge barrel on armorer's block on the floor, and we're not going to use a lot of pressure. We're just going to, we should be able to just kind of drop this relatively heavy cleaning rod on there. There you go. Okay, that pushed it right out. No crazy force required, guys. You shouldn't have to go beating on this thing. So let's have a look at our Slug. All right, looks like we got our measurement here with the Cerrosafe. We're going to have a look and see what we're talking about for our rifle caliber. All right, and what you'll do is you'll put this between the jaws, and you'll want to turn to kind of figure out the nominal diameter. All right, so at the biggest part, we're talking about as 627 in terms of your grooves. All right, so your groove diameter is, I can't write today, is 627, okay? Your land diameter, which is what basically the bore ride diameter is, we're going to call that 610. All right, so knowing what I know, if we look at a 20 gauge right here, I wrote down the measurement for a 20 gauge cylinder bore diameter is 615. So the land diameter is 610, which is pretty close to that bore ride diameter for a cylinder bore 20 gauge. The grooves are 627, so that means that that's how deep. That's the largest pill that we want to use, is a 627 diameter projectile. What that tells me is that this is some form of 20 gauge paradox round. What paradox rounds were basically, they're kind of like shotgun rounds, but basically treat it like a rifled slug barrel. Okay, so basically what we've got is a 16 gauge on the left, and we've got a 20 gauge paradox rifle on the right. But we're not going to call it that yet until we cast the chamber. So let's do this all over again, and let's have a look at the chamber, and we can get some precise measurements so we can know what we're dealing with here. All right, guys, so same thing. We've got this thing just gently clamped up. Not crazy, guys. You don't want to deform this Damascus, okay? You know, it's pretty tough stuff, but Damascus does have its, you know, there's a reason they don't make barrels out of Damascus anymore, guys. You don't want to go squeezing on this too hard. We're going to do a chamber cast as best we can, to the best of our ability here. And we're going to run it. So we're going to put the same thing, same patches. We're just going to patch the back of the barrel. And we want to get, I like to get about the first inch of rifling. That way we kind of see what sort of free bore we've got, what kind of, what we're dealing with. We're going to go, we're going to call that good. Okay. We're not going to fill up all the way to the back of the chamber. We're going to go just about to where that rim starts to form, because we can sort of extrapolate the overall length based on kind of where the back of the chamber stops and where this measurement for the rim. I can put the depth gauge in there and see how thick the rim is, and I can measure the interior diameter to figure out what our rim diameter should be. That's probably going to come into play when it comes to making ammo for this thing. All right, so same thing. I've got a generous heaping spoonful of Cerrosafe here. And again, we're going to use our Cerrosafe ninja skills to properly administer a dose of the Silver Beauty. Doesn't take much heat, guys. All right, and I'm going to be very careful. We're just going to give a little bit of heat on the chamber. Not a lot, because we don't want these barrels delaminating. enough. Whoa. It's all right, spilled a little bit. I won't tell if you don't. All right, down the hatch. That's what we want right there. We're going to let that cure up. And the nice thing is, the Cerrosafe that found its way to the floor is not a big deal. We can just peel it right back up. Just like that. No big deal. So if we spill a little bit, don't worry. I mean, it immediately hardened as soon as it hit the floor. So not a big deal there. All right, we're going to let this sit up. And we got just the right amount of heat on there. No big deal. It's not hot enough to cause any problem with the barrel, you know, potentially delaminating. The gun overall looks to be in pretty shootable condition. We're going to determine that after we figure out what kind of caliber we're working with and if I have anything laying around that I can use to make this work. So, all right, let's move on. All right, we're going to unceremoniously drive this out. It shouldn't require a lot of force. May have to have a little bit more of a wrap on it to get it out. But you see we have the base of the barrel supported by the block, and then we've allowed ourselves a space for it to hopefully just pop out. All right. May have to drive it out. So now, support the top of that barrel for me, if you don't mind. And just hang on to it. All right, she looks to be free. That took a little bit more courage with the hammer. Oh, wow. Let's have a look at this. All right, we got a little bit of an idea what's going on here. We can see that there's a pretty dang distinct end of the chamber here with a little bit of free bore. Let's take a measurement here of some of the rifling. Didn't fill out quite as nice as I'd like to see, but I think we're going to be okay. So let's just look at the cartridge length, because that was one thing that was of concern to us. We're going to say, based on the amount that it flowed out of the back, about a 1.3 inch chamber. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about here. So chamber length, or let's just say cartridge length, is 1.3 roughly inches, or 33 millimeters. You can check me on that, but I think it's a 33 millimeter chamber, because we are talking old school stuff. Now, we're going to look at the right where the rifling starts. See what kind of throat we're talking here. So we're right back at our 627. Okay, so not a, you know, the rifling is pretty dang tight and consistent all the way from the muzzle, which we determined was about 627, to about the first, you know, quarter inch to half inch of rifling. You've got a pretty solid amount of riflings, good and strong, and it's consistent. You got a pretty good amount of space there in terms of your free bore, and right where that rifling starts to, look at that, 627. All right, so no problem there. So we know that this is definitely a 20 gauge Paradox. I've took the liberty of taking a 20 gauge hole, and you can look at that diameter and you can definitely tell that we're right there in 20 gauge territory. Another thing, if I take this this casting and I take this 20 gauge hole and I put it in the end of it, look at that. Look how nice that fits. Okay, it's just a nice gentle friction fit, nothing crazy. But remember, we're not talking a wadded slug like you would see in a 20 gauge shotgun. I took the liberty of pulling a 20 gauge slug. Okay, so this is a 20 gauge slug and it measures about 609, 610. Okay, so your 20 gauge slugs are going to be about 610. You can get round balls in a 615, but a 615 or a 610 is going to be too small for this rifle barrel to shoot accurately, because the groove diameter is 627. And just because of what I know about these types of guns, I know that 627 equates to a 20 bore, full 20 bore for a Paradox gun. So we need a 627 projectile. Well, this is a 610. So why don't we, and obviously I can order a mold if I want. and that's all good and fine. But just humor me. If we take this patch and wrap it around the back, we're going to take a measurement of what the patched slug would be. Look at that. 626. So that means that a patched round ball, or a round ball appropriately sized, is what this gun is probably designed to shoot. A lot of these guns, and I'm just going to fill you in on a little bit of backstory on these types of guns, these old German guns like this. They used to offer these things in a variety of different cartridge sizes in a paradox, okay? They had a 1.3 inch paradox, which is now what we know this is. And if you look it up, yes, there is a such thing as a 1.3 inch 20 gauge paradox. There weren't many of them made, and there's not a lot of them out there, but it is a cartridge. It does exist. So we've identified this as 33 millimeter 20 gauge paradox on the right side on our rifled barrel. So it's basically, it's not a rifle barrel, it's a shotgun barrel, but it is a slug barrel for a 20 gauge, basically, is what we've determined here. So they made a couple of different chamber lengths. So if you ever encounter any of these old guns with a .600 bore or bigger, you can pretty much determine that it could be some form of paradox. They did them in like a 1.5, 1.6 inch chamber. They did a few with 2 inch chambers. The 1.3 or 33 millimeter chambers are probably the shortest chamber that they ever made in this particular gun. So I'll tell you what, we're going to take some of this 20 gauge brass and let's turn it down and see if it fits. And then we're going to start looking at headspace and just seeing what kind of play we've got between the action and the face of the barrels when they're on face. And we're going to see how much play we've got between the brass and the face of the receiver. Let's do that. So I think we've pretty much determined that we can order our mold. And just for fun today, we might load up some of these patch 20 gauge slugs and just see if they shoot. All right, so let's do it. All right, guys, I took a 20 gauge brass hull and trimmed it to 1.3 inches. And what I did is I went ahead and took the lathe and I had to relieve a little bit of the rim, just a hair, to get it to chamber the way I wanted. But we're gonna go ahead and demonstrate that and show you guys what we're dealing with here. Put the barrel back in place. Oops, might help if I actually, there we go. Thing might be a little bit of a bear to play with here. All right, barrel back on. Now, we're going to open it up. 20 bore paradox. And we'll go ahead and we'll put our 16 in there too, just for fun. All right, we're going to close it up. All right, now the lever should not give us any resistance. That's perfect. So that bit of bevel that we put on the 20 bore and then our 16 going right in, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're going to take a feeler gauge. I think we're almost there, guys. I think we have this figured out. Let's just take a 6 thou, see if it'll eat 6 thousandths behind either one of these. So see, the lever does not even begin to close on a 6 thousandths feeler gauge. And guys, that's not a lot of space. Just to really drive the point home, why don't we take an even thinner gauge and see what it'll eat. I'm all thumbs today, guys. Apologize. All right. Let's go, let's half that. 3 thousandths. You don't want to use a ridiculous amount of force. Look at that. Won't even close on the 3 thou. So that gun is in impeccable shape. I mean, we see that it locks up nice and tight, exactly like we want. All right, let's go ahead and test the 20 bore side to see if our brass is going to work. Something else you want to look for too. So we see that we have this gauge in here that's only 3 thou. We're going to look down and we can see that the barrels are also not off center, which is wonderful. I know that's difficult for me to demonstrate, but guys, this gun mechanically I believe to be safe to shoot. The barrels sound just fine. You know, they got a nice ring to them. We have visually inspected the insides of the bores and the outsides of the bores very, very carefully to check for splits or cracks or any form of delamination of our Damascus. I see no reason why this gun is not safe to fire. It locks up tight. So basically what we wound up finding out here, and we are going to shoot this gun for you, I believe. I think I can make it work. So what we're dealing with, we've got a turn-of-the-century German-proofed hunting rifle or hunting gun in a Cape gun configuration with a French underlever system in 16 gauge smoothbore on the left and a 20 gauge 1.3 or 33 millimeter paradox on the right. Whew! That's a lot to go on, but I think we have a bit of a plan here. I'm going to load up a black powder round or two, and let's shoot this gun and see if it'll do anything. How about that? All right, guys. How about a prime 20 gauge hole, cut down to 1.3 inches, and let's stuff 55 grains of 2F. Oh, it looks like a lot of powder because it's such a short case. And let's grab a 20 gauge cushion. All right. And why don't we twist this paper patch in with a 20 gauge 610 slug and just see, that should fit kind of tight. Look at that. There you go. Homemade 1.3 inch 20 gauge paradox. Now granted, we are going to order a proper mold for this particular gun. I think it's going to work. So I'm going to load up a few more. You see that's pretty simple. We're going to shoot it. Well, you know that all of your companions have a lot of faith in you when everybody's standing about 100 feet away from you. You're about to shoot an old gun. But anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I think we got this figured out. I opted for a 20 gauge plastic hull. We did kiss the rims of the cartridge just a hair on the lathe to get them to go into the gun. I think we're going to be okay here. 55 grains of 2F and a patched 20 gauge slug that weighs 3/4 ounces. Wish me luck. Nice fit, very nice fit. Nice tight lockup. All right. Hopefully we hit the right side of a barn well and not blow up in the process. Did I shoot over the top of the gong?
Looked like it was a little high.
Might have been high, all right. Well.
All your guns always shoot high.
Heck, looks good to me. So we did order an appropriate mold, listen to me, for this particular gun. This is just a patched slug, so it may not shoot as good. Let me bring my point of aim down just a scotch.
Wait for the smoke to clear.
You gotta wait for the smoke to clear. Looks like it's shooting about 6 inches high and a few inches to the left there. That's okay. Try again. I think getting that mold on the way is going to be the ticket to getting this thing to shoot like we want. If I had to guess, I'm going to venture to say, guys, that this old gun, considering that it's just a little 1.3 inch chamber, was probably originally designed to shoot round balls of some sort. And a round ball in a 20 gauge weighs about 340, 350 grains. So the projectile that I've ordered is a conical that weighs 340 grains, and we sized it to 627. So guys, really the point of this video and what we're trying to drive home is don't be afraid to learn something when it comes to these old guns. A couple of blocks of Cerrosafe and a little bit of know-how, and you can figure these old girls out. Don't let them intimidate you. All right, one last round. I think the gun shows some promise. And guys, back then, this would have been a pretty high-end gun. This wouldn't have been the kind of gun that just anybody bought. It's got some very nice appointments. I'm glad to see she's still soldiering on. All right, one more round.
Oh yeah.
Not bad. We got those last two stacked on top of each other. So once you know your point of aim, that's not terrible. All right, under lever, open it up. There she is. All right, we're gonna live to fight on another day. Guys, thank you for watching today's video. We appreciate the support. We hope you learned something. I know we learned something. We'll see you guys next time.